Happy Friday. Welcome back to Inside the Lines. Today is the prop party, and now we get some NBA props to add into the mix. So we have some college football, some NFL, and NBA. We'll start in the NBA with Steven and Jake here. A few plays that we like for tonight. We'll pull up the best odds we have, but let's start with DeAndre Ayton. Portland plus 3.5 on the road versus Memphis. We like his points and rebounds here.
Yeah, the best price right now is still 23.5, but it's 24.5 everywhere else. I like the fact that, the model line's 29. Scoot Henderson's out. Anthony Simons has been out. And Shaedon Sharpe might also be out. So a lot of their three leading scorers heading into the season are out. Memphis's front court has been injured. Well, they'll be injured all year long with Steven Adams out. And so without him and Brandon Clark, they went from a good, solid rebounding team last year, +2 on the boards, to -4 so far in the early part. So Ayton's last 4 games, he's 3-1. He's been averaging right around 26 points, rebounds, and assists. Points and rebounds. So I kind of like that over right now. At 23.5, I would get it right now while you can. The next one, Bam Adebayo. You can still get 1.5 for steals and blocks at -115. I'd like Bam because I think Miami just lost to Brooklyn at home, and it's a pretty bad loss. So they'll probably be motivated, even though they're going against a weak Washington team. I think that will they'll come out and either rack up these positive stats early and get that game done early, or maybe they're not as good as they're a playoff team, and maybe they're not as good in the regular season. And they'll have to play a full game. But either way, I kind of like Bam's. We have him projected for right on 2. And his average is 1.89. So I would expect juice of like -130 or -140 on this one. And you can still get it at -115.
Just to stay on this game, out of curiosity, what are our feelings on Jordan Poole right now? Is it too early to tell what his role is going to be and how we feel about his player props?
I tweeted this out that my
player in the league.
He's my least favorite player in the league, and Washington was my favorite team as a pro basketball team growing up as a kid. So it's a really horrible mismatch, a horrible thing that happened to me. But he's just not a good shooter. Even when he was scoring well, he's not a good shooter. He's not a good passer, and he's a horrible defender. So
nice.
The triple threat. We always say play his primary defensive assignments over. But if Poole doesn't get major minutes because of his deficiencies, he only had 20 minutes last game, 25, then maybe that play won't be as strong. Jake, you had a play, I think, on Butler.
Yeah, out of Jimmy Butler over. I've had 2 different plays on Butler. I've over 10.5 rebounds and assists, and over 20.5 points rebounds, or 30.5 points rebounds and assists. I just think that he's going to take over this game against a weak Washington team. I think they're tired of losing to teams that they shouldn't after they lost to Brooklyn. I think he can get this done and still sit out most of the fourth quarter because they have a big lead.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Let's move to Golden State. They're 5.5-point dogs on the road going to OKC. You like Klay Thompson with 2 assists here.
Yeah, I mean, he averages 2.3, and the chemistry on Golden State looks so much better, again, without Jordan Poole. And even though Chris Paul is there, and you would think that Chris Paul might dominate the ball, it hasn't resulted. They've been sharing the ball. Everyone's getting their assists, and the line is lower, at only just 1.5. Let me bring up my screen, see what the latest line is there. Klay 1.5. You can still get -115 on the over. I think it's lower because this year game totals for Golden State games have been 18 below what last year's average was. Obviously, small sample size. And Oklahoma City game totals are down 10. But if you look at the actual split, Golden State is averaging more on the road than they did last year, 119. And OKC, again, small sample size, is allowing more at home, 117. So those stats indicate that Golden State could be in for another good offensive night, and Klay can get his 2 assists.
Mm-hmm.
The over is also 69% last 2 years for Klay Thompson.
Wow, you're going deep there 2 years in. There's some questions about the Milwaukee game. Giannis over 10.5 rebounds. See if we have any value there while we have your screen up on the model.
Let's see. Well, the play that, again, it's not all about me, that I'm playing is Jalen Brunson under 32.5 points.
There, I got you.
But 10.5, we have him only at 9.6 rebounds.
Okay.
So the line that was in question was
10.5.
And they wanted the over.
Yeah.
Okay. Milwaukee's tough to gauge. I'm banking on Milwaukee to put a much better effort after they got shellacked by Toronto, and they got out rebounded by 21. And the team is obviously off to a slow start defensively. They're allowing 8 more points a game than they did a year ago, and teams are really attacking Dame. So I would be a little worried because Julius Randle's been rebounding well. I mean, last game only had 6. Before that, he was consistent double-doubles.
Yeah. Well, let's stick with that game to go to your prop. You have Jalen Brunson under 32.5 points, rebounds, and assists. Do you think this might be a game he doesn't really need to prove too much in?
Well, I think he has. I think that for the sake of his efficiency, that the Knicks will be playing a lot of guards. They'll be playing the Villanova backcourt of recent years: Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo, and an attack Dame defensively, and keep those bodies fresh and keep throwing them because they're all bigger, physical players. And then, so Brunson this year, the under is 4-1. He's down to 28.8 this year, and still playing over 30 minutes, but not playing those 40-minute games that he was in the playoffs and for down the stretch last year. So that's why our model has it closer to 28.5 as the total. Under last year was 2-1 versus Milwaukee for Brunson, and I just think that Milwaukee in this case will be a little more locked in defensively. After kind of a humiliating performance yesterday.
Yeah. Going back to that OKC game, a question quick about Josh Giddey with SGA out. We like him over 6.5 assists.
Probably. We have him right around 6.5 assists. So I think so. I think I got to upgrade Giddey more. Giddey, we only have him projected for the 31. He had 31 minutes last game without SGA. I think there's a chance that he gets more minutes than 31. But that's so. But I like that play because again, we have him the 6.5 assists even at just a 31-minute projection. If you think that he could be in for 35, 36, then that's a pretty good play.
It's amazing how in the NBA those 4 or 5 minutes matter so much, but they do.
Walker Kessler last night. Walker Kessler was pacing along just fine. He had. And then
he hasn't played in the fourth quarter, like the last couple.
He didn't play in the fourth quarter. I got to remember that when Kelly Olynyk is available, they always go with Olynyk down the stretch. It's maddening.
I want to take one more just overall question. The Pacers dealing with some injuries, so kind of a question of who is going to be producing the points tonight.
Halliburton's in, right? Is he out? He might be out. He might be out. Yeah. So. Unfortunately, I was dependent on a vendor here, and they didn't rule out Halliburton yet. So I don't. What will happen is obviously Buddy Hield. I mean, I was worried that he wouldn't play him much, because like a trade bait, but he got 24 minutes last game without Halliburton. He hasn't had a big offensive night yet, but that could happen. Mathurin had a bad game last night.
Yeah, he had 8 points, and I know Underdog had a special with when Halliburton was ruled out. They had Mathurin bumped to 12.5 points and 8.5 and didn't score in the second half. So that was.
We think he'll bounce back. I mean, we have him even with Halliburton in this current projection. We have him at 17, so we'll probably have Mathurin closer to being 18 or 19 after we update this. Bruce Brown, how's he been fitting in Indiana? I mean, he had a one good game, a couple good games already.
It's classic Bruce Brown. He'll have 20 points and 5 points, 20 points and 5 points.
And Nembhard, was a much better NBA player than I thought he would be. Probably because he cost us as a Gonzaga point guard when we were all high on him. So I basically didn't give him a chance all year last year as a rookie, and it probably wasn't the smartest decision. But he had a slow start. He had a pretty good game with 17 field goal attempts, just 1 for 7. But I would assume that it would be Brown, Nembhard, and Mathurin.
Yeah, good to know there. That's all we have for NBA right now. You can continue to ask your questions in the chat. We can answer them as well. Derek's there to answer too. Let's move into some football here. We'll go to the NFL first. We'll talk about some of those games. Let's get rid of this here. 2 plays for Sunday, 1 play for Monday night. Let's start with your Ravens. Gus Edwards over 40 or 59.5 rushing and receiving yards. They're hosting Seattle. The line is -6.
Yeah. So last year he had one catch all year, one target and one catch. So he averaged 56.5 rushing and receiving yards. This year he's up to 66.5 because Todd Monken actually uses him not in the passing game, but he's on the field more. And he's, he had this one 80-yard catch, which is not indicative of future performance. But it was a great sign because he showed burst. I think he ran like 20.5 miles per hour on it. And so it shows the OC that, okay, this guy actually has some wheels in addition to being a big, powerful dude. And also it came on a play where Lamar Jackson's been doing this new thing where he looks like he tucks the ball like he's going to run. Defenders come up and then he just dumps it off. And last week it was a little shovel pass through 3 or 4 defenders to Gus. And then this 80-yard one was a little toss that he took for 80 yards. So now that I'm pretty confident that Gus has the confidence of the team, he had 3 rushing touchdowns last week to be the primary workhorse, and he's getting that 2 target, 1.5 target, 1 catch, 8 to 10 yards per game consistently. I like the over here.
Mm-hmm. We'll stick with the running backs. We'll go to Rachaad White, that you like his under 49.5. They are headed to Houston as 2.5-point dogs.
Yeah, the under is for even at 49.5, which is a low number, is 39. Is 19.5. He has a 34.5 rushing yard average. Now that is up. So this year he went from kind of backup running back to lead runner, but it's still only at 43.6, and the under is still 5-2. Our model line's only 39. It has a lot to do with the fact that he has had some good receiving games, and maybe they're can see him more as a third down back. And Chase Edmonds, certainly not some kind of workhorse runner, but he came back from injury last week and he had 3 or 4 carries. So maybe he'll get a little bit of a role as a second ball carrier, cutting into White's usage there. But the biggest thing is Houston's run defense was abysmally bad last year. They allowed 170 a game at over 5 yards a clip. This year it's down to 99 a game at 3.6 yards. So it's literally going from last to top 3. D'Amico Ryans probably has a ton to do with that. The defense, a lot of the players they drafted, Will Anderson and so forth. They just held Carolina to 44 total rushing yards as a team. And they're also upset that they lost that game. So I think that they're going to really, shut down White.
Mm-hmm. We'll go with our third running back of the prop party, 17.5 yards for Breece Hall receiving. They host the Chargers for Monday Night Football as 3.5-point dogs.
Yeah, I was really surprised by this line. It's actually down to 16.5, and that is the one I'm going to use. You can get -120 at the Hard Rock, which apparently is just reopening in Florida. So I added it to our OddsJam page. I was surprised by this line until I did a little more digging. It's interesting. His average is way higher than 16.5, but his median value, his middle value is 17. The fact is in his 14 games he's played, he only has 2 that are quote unquote normal 15 to 25 receiving yard performances. He either gets 50 or more or like 5. And so I think the odds makers kind of struggle with this line, which is why some people have 16.5, but like a -150 on the juice and a +120 on the under. This player prop, even the lines that are 17.5 are -140 on the over and -140 on the under. So this is a tough one. It's one of those, he's like a light switch. It's either off or on. And I think it's going to be on because we know about the Chargers. They do have some elite pass rushers, and they have the worst pass defense in the league. Zach Wilson's fallen in love with, he has 2 apples of his eye, Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall in the passing game. Those 2 combined for like 22 targets the last game. And Breece Hall's receiving yards and targets have gone up steadily each week. So even if what goes up comes back down, I don't expect to go back down by 60 yards. I mean, he had like 76 yards last week. So I'm hoping for a normal game, which in my case would be 25 plus yards.
Yeah. And Jake was mentioning earlier, if you're feeling, pretty confident in it, you could always take an alternate line, get him up to like the 30 yards and hits that threshold of the 5 or 40. And, if you really think this is a big night for him, you could probably get better value there. So that's all we have for NFL right now. Jake is going to go over some of his college football plays. I'm going to take Steven into the chat to answer some more questions there. Let's start with some of the prettier games of the weekend. I'll call them marquee matchups, but Michigan's over 30-point favorites, so that might be a stretch of the word. But let's start with Kansas State at Texas. Texas laying 4. We've been talking about this game since Sunday and that line movement, but you like a player prop here.
Yeah, DJ Giddens, Kansas State's running back, he has had 2 or more receptions, I think, all but 2 games this season. And they'd like to use him as a receiving back in this game. They've been giving Trayshawn Ward a lot more carries, but they've been using Giddens more as a receiving back. We have him projected for 2.4 receptions. And against a good Texas defensive line, I think they're going to want to spread the ball out a little more and maybe dump the ball off to him and get him in space instead of running him up the middle. So I really like that play.
Yeah. And again, I talked about the Michigan game. They're hosting Purdue as 32.5-point favorites. Interesting now for JJ McCarthy. Usually they'd sit him in the fourth quarter for a game like this, but being a Heisman candidate, do you think they keep him in so he can rack up his stats?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to keep him in if they're up by 30. But I think he could easily get this number early in the game. But the thing that's interesting is that he averages like 30 rushing yards a game at home and only like 10 on the road. And so we really like him at home here. We have him just for 24, but I could see him getting that early in the game because we have his backup playing a decent amount, Jack Tuttle. So if the game's closer than expected, then he should go way over this mark.
Mm-hmm. And then Notre Dame Clemson, looking at this line when I made this graphic, I was a little surprised that it was such a short line with Clemson +3. Do you agree, or do you think this is probably where it should be?
I just think Clemson at home, it's more of historical respect here for Clemson and that they're going to be fired up after losing 4 games in a row. So I think that they're expecting Clemson to be fired up, even though I think Notre Dame's the better team. But this line for Holden Stace is very interesting because if you look at his game log, he's only hit this number once, and he had a 121-yard game. In the other games, he's had like 10, 14, 13. We have him projected for 18. He's only gone over 20 once, and that's when he went over 100 yards. And Clemson has really good linebackers, and these linebackers are going to be on their tight ends. And Mitchell Evans is their number 1 tight end. So maybe Stace gets a little open because they put their top backers on Mitchell Evans. But 33.5, I just think that's too high.
I saw a question in the chat about where was it? About Harrison Whaley. We'll get to him. I see another question about Kansas State's quarterback Will Howard's rushing yards. Do we want to take a look at the model quick and see if we have value on that play? Maybe you've looked at it already.
Yeah, I have the model up on my computer too as well. We have Will Howard 33 rushing yards. I mean, it's interesting because sacks count against quarterbacks in rushing yards, and Texas does have a really good D-line. It's on the road. So it scares me, even though Howard is a good running quarterback, but it takes 1 sack for a loss of 15 yards, and then he's climbing back up the rest of the game. So it's hard to bet on. I mean, he's had 9 for 24, 462, 3 for 0. Let's see what he did against against Texas last time he played them. I don't think he's played against Texas. So it's interesting. I'd probably stay off from this line. And then Montrell Johnson, Florida Gator. I like Etienne's over receiving yards. I think it's at 7.5. He's a really bad pass blocker. So when he's in there on receiving downs, on passing downs, it's because he's used as a receiver. Johnson, I lean rushing yards over, and Etienne over receiving yards. Mackenzie, I think you're on mute.
Oh, whoops. Johnson, we have projected for 60 yards there. So not too much value, but it's a play Jake likes as well. All right, let's head back to your plays quick since we're running out of time. I saw someone asking about Wyoming's running back here, Harrison Whaley. You like him as well?
Yeah, we have Harrison Whaley for 105 yards tonight. I just think against a bad Colorado State rushing defense that gave up over 200 yards to Boise State's Ashton Genty. This game's in Wyoming. It's going to be cold. Another cold game. That's benefits the running backs. I think he could get this on 2 runs up the middle. I think this line is lower than it should be because he's had a couple bad games, but his games where he's gone over, he's gone well over it, like 115, 120 yards. So I like the over there.
Luke Altmaier, a guy we'd like to talk about a lot, usually taking his rushing yards, I believe. But you like him to have an interception here.
Yeah, early in the season, we are on Altmaier rushing yards. And now he's 10 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. They're playing against Minnesota, who has a really good defense. Minnesota's favorite. It's at Minnesota. We're expecting Minnesota to be ahead, so Altmaier's going to have to pass the ball at some point in this game. We have him projected for 1.3 interceptions, so pretty good value on the over here.
Brendan Sullivan, what of Northwestern quarterback situation? Where is he in line? I know we were dealing with a lot of quarterback injuries there for a while.
Yeah, so Sullivan and Ben Bryant have been alternating between as a starting quarterback for Northwestern this season. Bryant got banged up. Sullivan's been in there. I think they're just going to rock with Sullivan because he has a couple years of eligibility. This is Ben Bryant's 6th year, so I think they're going to see what they have in Sullivan. But he's going against Iowa, and I know we're like fading Iowa's offense, but we really like Iowa's defense. This game is, I think the total is at 30.5, and it's at 30.5 for a reason. Because not great quarterback plays and pretty good defenses historically. I mean, Northwestern's defense isn't great, but we have Sullivan projected for 1.2 interceptions, so I like the over there. And Quinshon Judkins, Ole Miss is going against Texas A&M, who has a good defensive front, but Judkins has gone over 9 of 11 games that he's played at home the last 2 years. We have him projected for 94. I think he should get that just because if they're up in this game, they're going to pound the rock.
Yeah, and that's the model projection 94. That's a pretty a lot of wiggle room there we have here. So let's talk about this rushing touchdown prop, 0.5 to 0.83. That is a big difference in the model, correct?
Yeah, so 80.83 means it's about 83. He's getting 1 rushing touchdown, 83% of simulations. If it's over, it's not because he's getting. If we have 1.2 for like Sullivan, it's not because we have him in 120% of simulations. It's because in some percent of simulations he has 2 interceptions, he has 3 interceptions. And yes, Joe Judkins is a beast. He had 204 yards rushing against Texas A&M last year. So the historical stats point to that as well. But so for Garrett Green, I think, and as a starter, he has a rushing touchdown in all but 1 game. So I really like him to get a rushing touchdown. We have value on CJ Donaldson under rushing yards, under 72.5 in that game. I feel more confident in Garrett Green for West Virginia but I don't mind playing CJ Donaldson against a good BYU defensive front.
Then we go to Henderson here. The line for him, 8.5 receiving yards. Is he a kind of guy that just doesn't usually get that targets, but since they're playing someone like Rutgers, he should see a little more?
Yeah, I mean, he's been banged up this season, so they've been trying to keep him healthy, but he's played 4 games this season, and in 3 of those 4 games, he's gone over the receiving mark of 8.5 receiving yards. I think he had 40 receiving yards against Wisconsin last week. And this game could be ugly because Rutgers has a good defense, and Ohio State, I think a couple years ago, they struggled against Rutgers. So, and if McCord's struggling, I think they're just going to try to dump it down and keep the ball with their running backs. He only throws to 1 player, Maserati Marvin Harrison. But I think Henderson's a reliable back who could catch some balls. So I like that play.
Round us out with 1 more here.
Yeah. Donovan Smith over 1.5 pass touchdowns. He's hit the over in all but 2 games, and one of the games was last week where he was just awful. They lost 41-0 to Kansas State, but he's going against a Baylor defense that isn't great. We have him projected for 2.3 passing touchdowns, so I think there's plenty of value here.
All right, let's hit that recap screen quick. I will not be reading through all of these, but feel free to take a picture, take a screenshot, do whatever you need to do. You can play this back to get the same thing. So hopefully we have a great, profitable weekend. I think we're due for it. Jake's been killing it. All these rushing props in the cold weather. I think we're seeing something here. So until then, no show tomorrow, but we will have a show Sunday going over those early look ahead and opening lines where you can get your best value. So be sure to look into that after the early edge into Sunday Night Football. That's where you'll find your best value. So with that, good luck with your bets, and we'll see you Sunday.